With me now, Editor-at-Large with the Australian newspaper, Paul Kelly. Paul, thanks so much. Where do we start as we look back at 2020? But I want to start in the United States with Donald Trump, because this is a continuing story and we don't know how he's going to play this period, which has been a fundamental part of the United States Republic, and that is the peaceful transfer of power.
Well, what we've seen in the last few weeks, Kieran, is extraordinary. We've seen Donald Trump striking at the democratic system, striking at the election result, resisting the will of the people, going to the courts and being repeatedly rebuffed, but making it clear that he still feels that this election was stolen. Now, this creates an enormous difficulty for President Biden and the Biden administration. It will be a question of legitimacy. What proportion of the American people will buy the Trump line? 20%, 30%, 40%? I mean, this is an unprecedented situation. So that is going to be an enormous internal domestic challenge for the United States. How fragmented will America be?
Yeah, it is extraordinary to think about the numbers of people who will buy into that conspiracy because it's being peddled by the president, no less. I wonder the challenge, though, for the Republicans to manage that, because they've tried to handle him carefully over the 4 years, and they'll have to for the foreseeable future. But what are the political ramifications of having Trump out there doing this when he didn't win this election? He won 70 million votes, but he did not win enough to secure the Electoral College. So this, to me, looks at a real challenge for Republican officials and lawmakers for the foreseeable future.
Well, that's the critical point, isn't it? I mean, Trump lost. I mean, he lost the election. Now, you can argue that if it hadn't been for the pandemic, he might have won, but the fact of the matter is he lost. And the dilemma the Republicans face is they took the demon into their house and they won with him. They won with him 4 years ago. But the fact of the matter is that Trump was a house wrecker. And he's changed the nature of the Republican Party. He's wrecked much of the party. And the party's now got this terrible dilemma because there's a constituency out there that's still loyal to Trump. But at some point or other, the Republicans have got to purge Trump from their house. Now, that's going to be a very difficult task. When do you do it? How do you do it? What will the price be for doing it? So that's the dilemma they face.
Yeah, it's a huge one. And for the Democratic Party, the flip side is that they look like they've got a bit of a clear run in that sense, in terms of unity at least. They've got 78 million votes behind them. What have you made of the Biden appointees who start as president-elect?
I think all the signals from Biden in terms of the appointments so far is that Biden wants to run as a centrist. Now, that's good. The question is whether the Democratic Party will allow him to do that or whether the progressive wing will get too frustrated. Now, what he'll do, while he's a centrist, he's going to run very prominently on climate change. And that is a matter of, I think, belief for Biden and John Kerry, but that will help to pacify the progressive wing of the party. But I think the other fascinating issue about Biden is Biden knows he will be a one-term president. This is what makes him unique. For all the other presidents since World War II that have won office, they always aspire to a second term. Well, he knows because of his age that won't happen. So I think psychologically, one of the fascinating things is whether this strengthens Biden and empowers Biden in terms of the way he conducts himself and relates to the American public. And finally, we've got to bear in mind he is a creature of the Senate. Unlike President Obama, who did not know the Congress, Biden does.
Yep, and has friends across the aisle, the way that chamber works. It's going to be interesting to watch, but your analysis there about one term, it sort of frees him up, you would think, potentially, which would be amazing to watch very closely as we do. Now, the Prime Minister, he has had one amazing year himself. If I'd said to you in January this is where he would end the year, you would have thought I was crazy, but he ends the year ascendant, really, in a political sense at home.
Well, nobody could have predicted this year. This is one of the big years in terms of international and Australian politics. And of course, it was dominated by the pandemic, the health crisis, which Australia has handled brilliantly, despite a number of mistakes we've made. You look at the relative performance of Australia, 908 deaths in this country compared to 300,000 in the United States, compared to 60,000 in the United Kingdom. So we've done brilliantly well when it came to managing the pandemic. With all the politics involved in that, the elevated position of the premiers and the role of the National Cabinet. Then, of course, we had the economic consequences. So this was one of the great economic challenges facing Australia in the last 50 to 70 years. We went into recession, but we've had an enormous fiscal stimulus, enormous monetary expansion, which have helped to underwrite activity. And whereas the Treasury at the start of the year were predicting that unemployment might get to 15%, it now looks it'll peak around about 7.5%. That is a brilliant outcome. So while the challenge is here still in economic terms, it won't be easy over the next couple of years. The truth is we've handled this economic challenge much better than people predicted at the start.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister in the box seat as we head into 2021 is certainly ascendant. One of the challenges, one of the clouds over the economy, there's two that I want to get your thoughts on. One is the removal or the tapering of the support and the implications of that. Two is China, which remains such a huge concern, with no sign that the Chinese will ease on their retribution at the moment.
Well, that's right. So, I mean, the challenges will be severe again next year. I think that Morrison has created an aura of confidence around him. He's seen to be someone who can get the big picture right. The government has made a lot of mistakes, but the electorate, I think, know this is a very difficult period. So I think the Prime Minister is being rewarded in terms of reliability, in terms of practical outcomes, and in terms of safety. I think they're very, very important qualities. Now, of course, the JobKeeper will be wound down. It's important that this happens. This will be a difficult transition for the government next year. But the big challenge, I think, in many ways is going to be China. China has declared political and trade war against this country. And every sign is that this war will intensify, and the penalty that we will pay will only intensify. Now, this is going to be a big challenge for the government. And there's no point the Conservatives within the Liberal Party saying, oh, this is just about taking on China and challenging China. That is the worst form of fatalism. What we've got to try and do is we've got to try and devise some sort of strategy to check this. Now, it's going to be very difficult, but we've got to try and hold the line against more and more economic retaliation by doing what we can, looking at what President Biden does, cooling the temperature. We've got to cool the temperature with China, we've got to talk less about China, and we've got to look for opportunities to try and stabilise the situation. That won't be easy.
It won't be. Maybe one course of action would be to look at Tokyo, countries that have been in the line of, the line of fire, so to speak, in terms of this economic and political coercion. They've been able to inject a bit of nuance into it, look to areas of cooperation. Possibly it's an area where Australia could look to areas of cooperation, like on humanitarian operations, things like that. But there's got to be something to be an off-ramp here, because at the moment it's just spiralling. There are some people, as you said, in this debate who would like to see it, self-fulfilling almost, but that would be so damaging to our country.
Well, it certainly would. Look, you can't see an obvious way out of this. If there was an obvious way out, you'd see the Prime Minister walking down that path. But I think that there's got to be a lot more consideration to exactly what we do. The The problem is we are being singled out by China. Yes, it's true that China is more aggressive and assertive across the board, but we are being singled out and we are being forced to accept very, very stringent and punitive trade measures. Now, what we've got to try and do is we've got to try and come to grips with that. There's no justification for us to be signalled out in this way.
Paul Kelly, I appreciate that, as always. We'll see you soon. In fact, we'll see you next year.
Thanks, Kieran.
So have a great Christmas.
Same to you.